Right now, as you watch this, somewhere in the Arizona desert, a building the size of 6 football fields is drinking water, not a little sip. We are talking about 2 million liters every single day. That building is not a factory, it is not a farm, it is a data center, and it needs that water just to keep its machines from melting. Here is what most people are told about our future. They are told it is digital, decentralized, limitless. They hear the word cloud, and they picture something weightless floating in the sky. They hear artificial intelligence, and they imagine pure software, pure code, something that exists in a dimension beyond physical limits. They picture a future where information is free, energy is clean, and resources are infinite. But that is a lie. Not a malicious one necessarily, but a very dangerous one. Because behind every single AI query you run, behind every image a chatbot generates, behind every autonomous car route calculated in real time, there is a physical machine. That machine is burning electricity, sucking water, and consuming metals that come straight from the ground beneath our feet. There's nothing virtual about it. There's nothing weightless about it. The cloud, as they call it, is not a cloud at all. It is a warehouse full of machines that would fill every room in your house 1,000 times over. And those metals, specifically silver and copper, are running out faster than anyone in mainstream finance wants to admit. The International Energy Agency reported that global data centers consumed around 415 terawatt hours of electricity in 2024. That is roughly 1.5% of all electricity used on Earth. And the IEA projects that number will more than double to 945 terawatt hours by 2030. To put that in perspective, that is more electricity than the entire nation of Japan uses in a year. All of it just to keep servers running. In the United States alone, data centers are already consuming about 4.4% of the nation's total electricity, up from just 1.9% in 2018. And by 2028, some projections show that figure climbing to 12%. But electricity is only one part of the equation. These facilities also consume staggering amounts of water. A 100 megawatt data center, which is standard for a hyperscale operation run by companies like Google or Microsoft, goes through roughly 528,000 gallons of water per day for cooling alone. In 2023, Google publicly reported that its data centers used 6.1 billion gallons of water worldwide. Microsoft's water consumption surged 34% in a single year, and total data center water consumption is projected to reach 68 billion gallons annually by 2028, up from 17 billion in 2023. That is a 300% increase in 5 years. Now, the question I'm going to ask you is not whether AI is impressive. Of course it is. The question is this: what happens when the physical world cannot keep up with the digital one? Because an economist asked that exact same question 161 years ago. He was not talking about data centers or AI. He was talking about coal and steam engines. And his answer was so disturbing that it shook the British Parliament to its core. His name was William Stanley Jevons. And the paradox he uncovered in 1865 is playing out right now, in real time, at a scale he could never have imagined. And it gets worse. Training a single large AI model now consumes enough electricity to power San Francisco for 3 days. A single ChatGPT query uses more than 10 times the electricity of a traditional Google search. A report released in April 2025 estimated that the power required to train frontier AI models could double annually. And here's a number that really puts it in perspective. Cutting-edge data center-level GPUs, the chips that do the actual AI computation, each draw between 350 and 700 watts of power. A single AI training cluster can contain hundreds of thousands of these chips running simultaneously around the clock for weeks or months at a time. The total power draw for one training run can reach 25 megawatts, which is enough to light a small city. We are not talking about gradual growth here. We are talking about exponential growth in physical resource consumption, driven by machines whose entire purpose is to become more efficient. That is the paradox in a nutshell. And it has been hiding in plain sight since 1865. This is the story they do not want you to understand. Because once you do, you will never look at the tech boom the same way again. Let me take you back to Victorian England. The year is 1865. Britain is the most powerful empire on Earth, and the reason is simple: coal. Coal powered the steam engines that ran factories. Coal heated homes. Coal moved trains and ships across oceans. Coal was not just fuel, it was the backbone of the entire British economy. It was the oil of its day, the semiconductor of its era. Everything ran on coal. But people were starting to get nervous. Britain's coal mines were being emptied faster than anyone had predicted. The country that had built an empire on cheap energy was starting to see the bottom of the barrel. Leaders and industrialists began to worry about what would happen when the coal ran out. Would factories close? Would the British economy collapse? Would the empire itself crumble? And here is where the common wisdom of the time kicked in. Politicians and engineers said the same thing. Do not worry. Technology will save us. We're making steam engines more efficient every year. Better engines mean less coal per task. Problem solved? It sounded perfectly reasonable. If a steam engine can do the same job with half the coal, then you use half as much coal. Simple math. Case closed. Except a young economist in Liverpool disagreed. William Stanley Jevons was only 29 years old when he published his book, The Coal Question, an inquiry concerning the progress of the nation and the probable exhaustion of our coal mines. And in it, he made an argument that nobody wanted to hear. He said that making engines more efficient would not reduce coal consumption, it would increase it, massively. His logic was precise and brutal. When you make a steam engine more efficient, you reduce the cost of the energy it produces. Cheaper energy does not make people use the same amount and pocket the savings. Cheaper energy makes people find entirely new uses for it. Before Watt's improvements, the Newcomen steam engine was so inefficient and expensive to run that it could only be justified for one purpose: pumping water out of coal mines. It literally burned coal just to get at more coal. But once Watt made the engine dramatically more efficient, suddenly steam power became cheap enough to run textile mills, ironworks, breweries, paper factories, and transportation. Entire industries that had never touched a steam engine before were suddenly powered by one. Factories that could not afford steam power before suddenly could. Industries that had relied on horses and manual labor switched to coal-driven machines overnight. Ships that used sails began burning coal instead. Railroads expanded into regions they never would have reached if the fuel costs had stayed high. Every jump in efficiency did not save coal. It opened the floodgates for more demand. Jevons looked at the actual production numbers and showed that after James Watt dramatically improved the steam engine in the late 1700s, making it vastly more efficient than Thomas Newcomen's earlier design, Britain's coal consumption did not fall. It exploded. Coal output had been growing at roughly 3.5% per year for the previous 80 years. After Watt's improvements made coal cheaper per unit of work, consumption tripled, then quadrupled, and kept climbing until Britain was burning through 100 million tons per year. Jevons wrote one line that still echoes through economics today. He said, "It is wholly a confusion of ideas to suppose that the economical use of fuel is equivalent to a diminished consumption. The very contrary is the truth." When the coal question was published, it caused a genuine political crisis. William Gladstone, then Chancellor of the Exchequer and later Prime Minister, read the book and took it so seriously that he raised the issue in Parliament. Jevons had essentially told the most powerful nation on Earth that its technological optimism was a dangerous delusion, that making coal engines better would not save them, that it would hasten their decline. Now, Jevons made one mistake in his long-term prediction. He assumed there was no substitute for coal, that Britain would simply burn through its reserves and collapse. He did not foresee petroleum, natural gas, and nuclear energy. But here is what matters. The mechanism he identified, the paradox itself, was dead right. It has been validated over and over again across nearly 2 centuries of industrial history. Cars got more fuel efficient, and total miles driven skyrocketed. Light bulbs became vastly more efficient, and the world now uses more lighting than ever before. Computers became smaller and cheaper, and now there are billions of them on the planet consuming more total electricity than at any point in human history. So here's my question. What happens when you apply the Jevons Paradox to the single largest infrastructure expansion in human history? What happens when it collides with artificial intelligence? In January 2025, a Chinese AI startup called DeepSeek released a model that stunned Silicon Valley. It was cheap, it was fast, and it performed remarkably close to models that had cost billions of dollars to develop. The tech world responded exactly the way Jevons would have predicted. They called it a breakthrough for efficiency. And then they promised to use even more AI because of it. Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella immediately posted on social media, and his words were telling. He wrote, "Jevons Paradox strikes again. As AI gets more efficient and accessible, we will see its use skyrocket." Read that carefully. The CEO of one of the largest technology companies on Earth just told you, in plain English, that more efficient AI will lead to more consumption, not less. He was not hiding it. He was celebrating it. And the numbers bear this out completely. In 2024, Meta, Amazon, Alphabet, and Microsoft collectively spent around $230 billion on AI and data center infrastructure. In 2025, those same companies committed to spending $320 billion. That is a 40% increase in a single year. The Stargate project alone, a joint venture to build OpenAI's infrastructure in the United States, is projected at $500 billion. Every new data center they build consumes massive amounts of electricity, water, and physical materials. There is no such thing as a virtual data center. Let me break down what is happening at the material level. Every AI server relies on thousands of high-performance electrical connections. Those connections require silver because silver has the highest electrical and thermal conductivity of any element on the periodic table. There is no substitute that performs as well. A single solar panel uses approximately 20 grams of silver paste. A single 500 megawatt solar array, the kind needed to power one large data center with clean energy, requires approximately 300 metric tons of silver. And the data centers themselves use silver in their precision contacts, thermal management systems, and high-efficiency electrical components. Now multiply that across every data center being built right now in Virginia, Texas, Arizona, Ireland, Singapore, and dozens of other locations around the world. Then multiply it again for every solar farm and wind turbine being constructed to feed those data centers green energy. Then add in every electric vehicle that needs silver in its battery management system, its sensors, its high voltage wiring, and its charging infrastructure. A single battery electric vehicle uses roughly 25 to 50 grams of silver, substantially more than the 15 to 28 grams in a traditional combustion engine vehicle. EV-related silver demand jumped an estimated 20% in 2025 alone. The Silver Institute projects that automotive silver demand will grow at 3.4% per year through 2031, with EVs overtaking combustion engines as the primary source of automotive silver demand by 2027. This is the Jevons Paradox at industrial scale. AI gets more efficient, more companies adopt it, more data centers get built, more electricity is needed, more solar panels and grid upgrades are required, and all of that needs silver and copper, two metals that the Earth cannot produce fast enough. The Silver Institute reported that in 2024, global silver demand reached 1.17 billion ounces, while mine supply lagged far behind. The market recorded its fifth consecutive year of deficit heading into 2025, with a cumulative shortfall of approximately 820 million ounces since 2021. That is almost an entire year of global production simply missing from the supply chain, and new significant mine production is not expected to come online until at least 2027 or 2028. Here's the part that makes this truly structural. About 71% of all silver mined on Earth comes not from dedicated silver mines, but as a byproduct of mining other metals, primarily copper, zinc, and lead. This means even when silver prices skyrocket, mining companies cannot just flip a switch and dig up more silver. They would have to increase copper and zinc production first, and those operations have their own bottlenecks, permitting challenges and decade-long lead times. In 2025, the United States officially added silver to its critical minerals list, the same category as rare earth elements. The U.S. government acknowledged that silver is no longer just a precious metal or a monetary curiosity. It is a strategic resource for national infrastructure and security. In China, the world's largest processor of silver, placed silver under an approval-based export licensing regime starting January 2026. Beijing now controls the outflow of silver the same way it controls rare earths. If that does not tell you something about what governments see coming, nothing will. If silver is the nervous system of the digital age, copper is the skeleton. And the skeleton is cracking under the weight. Copper wiring delivers electricity to every server rack in every data center on Earth. Copper cables connect those data centers to the power grid. Copper is in the transformers that regulate power flow, the cooling systems that prevent overheating, the backup generators that prevent catastrophic failures, and the bus bars that distribute current across facility floors. Without copper, nothing in the digital world works. Not one thing. A major study released by S&P Global in early 2026 projected that global copper demand will surge from 28 million metric tons in 2025 to 42 million metric tons by 2040. That is a 50% increase in just 15 years. And a huge portion of that growth is coming directly from AI and data center expansion. S&P Global estimated that copper demand from data centers alone will rise from 1.1 million metric tons in 2025 to 2.5 million metric tons by 2040. AI training facilities, specifically, are expected to account for 58% of total data center copper demand by 2030. Daniel Yergin, vice chair of S&P Global, described the situation in stark terms. He called copper the great enabler of electrification and warned that economic demand, grid expansion, renewable energy, AI computation, digital industries, electric vehicles, and defense are all scaling at the same time, and the supply is not on track to keep pace. In 2025, half of U.S. GDP growth was attributed to AI spending, primarily on chips, data centers, and the electrical systems that support them. That is an extraordinary concentration of economic activity on a single sector, and it is all flowing through copper wiring. The mining industry is not even close to keeping up. Wood Mackenzie forecast a 304,000-ton refined copper deficit for 2025, with an even wider gap expected in 2026. The IEA's critical minerals outlook placed copper on a path where existing and planned mines meet only about 70% of projected 2035 demand. That means nearly a third of the copper the world will need in 10 years does not have a mine attached to it yet. The projected supply deficit could reach 10 million metric tons by 2040. And opening new copper mines is not like opening a new warehouse. In the United States, the average time from discovery to production for a new copper mine is close to 29 years. Even in Chile, where 13 new projects worth $14.8 billion are in the pipeline, most of that supply will not hit the market until 2028 or 2029 at the earliest. In the Democratic Republic of Congo and Indonesia, major operations have faced accidents, drought, and community opposition that have disrupted timelines. There's another bottleneck that almost nobody talks about publicly, but that is causing real panic behind closed doors: transformers. Every data center needs industrial transformers to step down high voltage electricity from the grid into usable power. These transformers are hand-wound. The process cannot be fully automated, and the current backlog for new transformer orders is 2 to 5 years. Hyperscale companies like Google, Microsoft, and Amazon are literally outbidding national grid operators to secure transformer supply. Think about what that means for a second. The companies building the AI future are pulling critical electrical infrastructure components away from the grid that regular people depend on for their lights, heating, and hospitals. Copper has already surged above $11,000 per metric ton, up from around $8,500 just 2 years ago. JP Morgan expects it to reach $12,500 per ton in the second quarter of 2026. And unlike gold, which mostly sits in vaults, copper gets consumed. It gets buried in buildings, soldered into circuit boards, wrapped around motors. Once it is used, recovering it is expensive and slow. In Chile and Peru, ore grades have been declining for years. Miners are pulling larger volumes of rock to extract the same amount of metal. Processing fees in China have plunged into negative territory for the first time in history. This is not a cyclical dip. This is a structural shortage being born in real time. And here is the detail that should keep energy planners up at night. Electric vehicles, which are supposed to be part of the green solution, require 2.9 times more copper than a conventional car. The number of EVs sold worldwide in 2025 was 25% greater than total new car sales in the United States, the world's second largest car market. S&P Global forecasts that the traditional combustion engine vehicle fleet will actually peak in 2026, meaning EV copper demand is about to accelerate even faster. On top of that, over 90% of all new electricity generation capacity installed globally in 2020 was solar and wind. Both require enormous amounts of copper. The grid infrastructure to distribute that power requires even more. Every direction you look, copper demand is climbing, while supply infrastructure takes decades to respond. Now, let me talk about the resource nobody in tech marketing wants to mention: water. Because this is where the digital illusion gets truly uncomfortable. Only 3% of all water on Earth is freshwater, and only 0.5% of all water on the planet is accessible and safe for human consumption. Into that razor-thin margin of drinkable water, we are now inserting the most energy and cooling-intensive industry in human history. Data centers produce enormous amounts of heat. Every chip in every server generates thermal energy that must be removed constantly, or the equipment degrades and eventually fails. The most common cooling method is evaporative cooling, where warm air passes through wet pads and water literally evaporates to absorb the heat. It works, but it consumes enormous volumes of fresh water that never comes back. A standard hyperscale data center running AI workloads at 100 megawatts of capacity can consume roughly 528,000 gallons of water per day. A single facility run by Meta in Goodyear, Arizona, reported using around 56 million gallons of potable water per year, equivalent to the household water consumption of 670 homes. And that is one building in one city for one company. According to a January 2026 analysis, even 30 minutes of AI usage by a single person requires roughly the volume of a standard water bottle in water consumption. Research published in 2025 estimated that data centers used approximately 17 billion gallons of water in the United States in 2023. Projections from industry analysts show that number could surge to 68 billion gallons by 2028. That is a 300% increase in just 5 years. And the indirect water consumption, the water used to generate the electricity that powers these facilities, is estimated by the IEA to account for 60% of total data center water use. When you add direct and indirect consumption together, data centers already rank among the top 10 most water-intensive commercial industries in the United States. Google's global data center water consumption increased roughly 20% from 2021 to 2022, and another 17% from 2022 to 2023. Microsoft saw a 34% jump in water use in a single year. And these are companies that have publicly pledged to become water positive. returning more water to systems than they consume. So far, the reality has gone in the opposite direction. And here is the cruel geographic irony. The places with the most available renewable energy, the deserts of the American Southwest, the Sunbelt regions, the arid plains, are also the places with the least available water. Data center operators face a brutal trade-off. They can either use more water and less electricity, or more electricity and less water. But they cannot avoid both constraints simultaneously. Arizona has already limited new home construction in parts of the Phoenix metropolitan area to preserve groundwater reserves. Yet dozens of new data center projects are being approved in the same region. The Salt River Project, a major Arizona utility, has reported over 10,000 megawatts of data center requests on its books. Serving all of that would require the utility to more than double its current generation capacity. On a record-breaking 116-degree day in August 2024, the utility delivered 8,219 megawatts of power, the most in its history. By the 2050s, according to S&P Global Research, roughly 45% of data centers worldwide will be located in areas classified as high water stress. In the U.S. state of Virginia, data centers already consume 26% of the state's total electricity. In Ireland, which hosts a massive concentration of tech data centers, these facilities consume around 21% of the entire nation's electricity. The IEA estimates that figure could rise to 32% by 2026. In Dublin alone, data centers account for a staggering 79% of electricity use. And in the mid-Atlantic region served by the PJM grid operator, electricity rates increased by up to 20% in the summer of 2025, driven partly by surging data center demand. A 2025 study published in an academic journal found that without mitigation efforts, global water consumption by data centers could increase more than 7 times by mid-century. 7 times. And the current trajectory is accelerating, not slowing. So let me connect the dots. AI gets more efficient, more people use it, more data centers get built. Those data centers need electricity, which requires copper and silver for the grid, transformers, and solar panels. They also need water for cooling, which competes with residential and agricultural supply in regions already under stress. Every single input is hitting a constraint simultaneously. This is not a theoretical problem. It is happening right now. I can already hear the counter-argument forming in some of your minds. They will figure it out. Technology always finds a way. They will invent better cooling. They will find substitute materials. They will build more efficient chips. And listen, I am not going to insult your intelligence by telling you that innovation does not matter. Of course it does. But here's what the Jevons Paradox teaches us, and it has taught us this lesson consistently for 161 years. Innovation in efficiency does not reduce total resource consumption. It increases it every single time. Let me walk you through the evidence. When solar panels became more efficient at converting sunlight into electricity, the world did not build fewer panels. It built astronomically more. Global installed solar capacity has increased more than tenfold since 2013, led by China, Europe, and the United States. The IEA forecasts that solar capacity will expand by another 3,200 to 4,400 gigawatts by 2030. Each of those panels uses silver, and even though manufacturers have reduced the amount of silver per cell through engineering improvements, the sheer scale of new installations has overwhelmed those savings completely. Industrial demand for silver now represents over 59% of total silver consumption, a record that was set in 2025. When cars became more fuel efficient, people did not drive less, they drove more. Total vehicle miles traveled globally continues to climb every year. When light bulbs got better, we did not dim the world. We lit up every corner of it. When computer chips got smaller and more powerful, we did not end up with fewer computers. We put computers in our pockets, on our wrists, in our refrigerators, in our doorbells, in our thermostats, and in every car on the road. The total electricity consumed by computing devices has never been higher in human history. This is the trap. And AI is the most powerful efficiency machine ever built. It will make everything cheaper, faster, and more accessible. And that will cause demand to explode in every direction simultaneously. Look at what happened after the DeepSeek announcement. A cheaper, more efficient AI model was released. Did it reduce total investment in AI infrastructure? Not even slightly. Within weeks, companies doubled down on spending. They reasoned that if AI was cheaper to run, they could deploy it in 10 times as many places. New use cases emerged that were not economically viable at the old cost per query. The efficiency gain was immediately consumed by expanded adoption. Jevons was proven right once again, this time in real time, with some of the smartest business leaders in the world explicitly invoking his name while confirming his paradox. Consider what is already being built and what is coming next. Autonomous vehicles will require constant real-time data processing and edge computing. Smart cities will generate and analyze data from millions of sensors around the clock. Every business on Earth is being told by consultants and technology vendors that they must adopt an AI strategy or face irrelevance. Healthcare, Agriculture, finance, manufacturing, logistics, entertainment, education, legal, creative industries, every sector is adding AI workloads. Every new use case generates more demand for computation, which generates more demand for data centers, which generates more demand for electricity, water, silver, and copper. The IEA found that in the United States alone, data centers are expected to consume more electricity for processing data than all energy-intensive manufacturing combined by 2030. That includes aluminum smelting, steel production, cement factories, and chemical plants. All of them together will use less electricity than the servers running AI. And each increment of new demand triggers the same resource chain. More electricity means more grid expansion. More grid expansion means more copper for transmission lines and more silver for electrical connections and contacts. More renewable generation means more solar panels, each requiring silver paste on its front and back surfaces. More data centers mean more cooling systems, more water consumption, and more competition with communities for basic resources. The paradox loop is self-reinforcing. Efficiency creates demand, demand creates infrastructure, infrastructure consumes physical resources, and those resources do not follow Moore's law. You cannot double the amount of copper in the Earth's crust every 18 months. You cannot code your way out of a water table that is dropping year after year. You cannot 3D print silver from nothing. The algorithms are exponential. The geology is fixed. The math does not care about your optimism. This is what I mean by the resource wall. It is not a single event. It is not a dramatic crash. It is a slow, grinding collision between exponential digital growth and linear physical supply, and we are already inside it. So where does all of this leave us? Let me be direct with you. Most people are positioning themselves for the future as if it is purely digital. They are buying tech stocks, investing in AI companies, and assuming that the winners of tomorrow will be the ones writing the best software. And maybe some of them will be, but they are ignoring the layer beneath the code, the physical layer, the atoms, and that is where the real bottleneck is forming. Every single digital system that exists, or will ever exist, depends on physical inputs that are finite, slow to extract and increasingly contested by competing industries and sovereign nations. Silver, copper, and water are not optional ingredients in the digital future. They are the prerequisites. Without them, the servers do not run, the grids do not transmit, and the chips overheat and die. Full stop. And the market is starting to notice in a big way. Silver surged dramatically in 2025, crossing all-time highs. The metal climbed above $60 an ounce, more than doubling from the start of the year. Analysts pointed to the convergence of 5 consecutive years of supply deficit, explosive industrial demand from solar and AI and EVs, and growing investor recognition that silver is no longer just a monetary metal. It is a strategic industrial commodity with no adequate substitute. Some forecasts now project silver reaching well above $100 per ounce in the coming years if deficits persist, and industrial demand continues to accelerate. India became the world's largest importer of refined silver in 2020, with imports estimated at around $9.2 billion, a 44% increase over the previous year. Physical buying of silver has surged globally, with mints in the United States and Europe struggling to keep up with coin and bar demand. The cumulative deficit since 2021, roughly 820 million ounces, is nearly a full year of global production. That gap is not closing, it is widening. Copper has followed a similar trajectory, breaking records and surging above $11,700 per metric ton. For the first time in 45 years, gold, silver, and copper all reached new all-time highs simultaneously. Major investment banks are projecting sustained copper price increases into 2026 and beyond, with JP Morgan targeting $2,500 per ton. The supply pipeline simply cannot respond quickly enough to meet demand that is being driven simultaneously by AI, electrification, renewable energy expansion, and national defense programs. Now here is the part that most people miss, the part that really matters for your positioning. The next major economic disruption is probably not going to come from a banking failure or a currency collapse. Those are the risks everyone is watching for, because those are the risks that happened in 2008 and 2020. But the Jevons Paradox points to something different entirely. It points to a physical limit. When you strip away all the financial engineering, all the monetary policy games, all the stock market narrative and hype cycles, the global economy runs on stuff, real, tangible, physical stuff that has to be dug out of the ground, refined in smelters, and shipped across oceans on cargo vessels. And right now, the demand for that stuff is growing exponentially while the supply is growing linearly at best, and in some cases not growing at all. This is why physical assets are getting a serious second look from informed investors and strategists. Land with water rights in regions where data centers are expanding. Physical silver held outside the financial system. Stakes in mining companies that actually produce the metals the digital economy depends on. Infrastructure plays that address the grid bottleneck and the transformer shortage. These are not old-fashioned or backward-looking investments. They are the picks and shovels of the AI gold rush. The people selling those picks and shovels during the California gold rush of 1849 made more reliable money than most of the miners. History does not repeat exactly, but it rhymes. William Stanley Jevons told the British Parliament in 1865 that they were making a dangerous intellectual error. They believed technology would reduce their dependence on coal. He showed them, with meticulous data and clear logic, that it would do the exact opposite. Britain did not listen in time. They burned through their coal advantage and eventually lost their position as the dominant global power, replaced by nations with access to petroleum and other resources. Today, the world is making the same category of mistake. We are told that the digital economy is dematerializing our world, making it lighter, cleaner, less dependent on physical resources. But the data tells the exact opposite story. Every click, every query, every generated image, every training run is powered by metal and cooled by water. The cloud is not floating. It is anchored to the earth by copper wire and kept alive by rivers. The Jevons Paradox is not a prediction. It is a pattern. It has repeated itself across every major technological transition for over a century and a half. Steam engines, automobiles, light bulbs, computers, and now artificial intelligence. Each time, efficiency created more demand, not less. Each time, the underlying resource was consumed faster than anyone expected. The digital age has physical limits. The question is not whether we will hit them. We are hitting them right now. The question is whether you will be positioned for it when the full impact arrives. Jevons said it best, 161 years ago. The very contrary is the truth. Efficiency does not save resources. It devours them. If you found value in this, subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because this conversation is just getting started, and most people are not even aware it is happening.